Well, good morning. And welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We have a lot to cover. Some breaking news coming in early. We'll get to that in just a little bit. First, a comment from a viewer last night, as a matter of fact. Hi, Frank. Hi. Did you happen to see that President Trump now is offering a garbage truck for free? Just pay shipping and handling. LOL. What a character. I'm so glad that I've lived to witness this great man. I did not see that specifically, but I would like to see that. Oh, look at all these waves coming in. People are starting off early. I love it. A little feedback there. Okay, here we go. This coming in late last night, and this is being reported by the New York Post. The strike by corrections officers who staff more than 30 New York prisons could soon be over after the guards union reached a deal with Governor Hochul late last night. The mediator negotiated deal suspends aspects of the Hall Act, a law that drastically cut down on solitary confinement. We know the numbers. The numbers are startling since the Hall Act was put into effect. Assemblyman Phil Palmisano provides those stats quite frequently, and we have mentioned them on the program almost ad nauseum. That inmate assaults have increased 169%. Inmate on staff assaults have increased 76%. And instances of contraband have increased 32%. So continuing here. And it includes a promise to ease mandatory overtime shifts, which are two major sticking points in the guards' decision to walk off the job back on February the 17th. Wow, it's been that long. Corrections officers argued the Hall Act, which aims to improve conditions for inmates, limits their ability to control unruly prisoners and makes their jobs tougher and even dangerous. Clearly, as I just read those numbers, there is no denying it. The people that are still defending Hall really have to twist themselves up into a pretzel to pretend that the HALT Act is a success. Now, the HALT suspension would last at least 90 days as part of the deal, though it could face opposition from progressive lawmakers. Keep that in mind. Even though you see those numbers, hear those numbers that I just read to you, that there's still, because of one-party rule in Albany, there is still a push to keep the HALT Act, so even the 90 days could be seen as unacceptable to far-left Albany. And by the way, just 90 days. So essentially telling corrections officers, hey, we'll keep you safer for 90 days. Is that good enough? Can you please come back? After 30 days, prison officials will begin to determine if reinstituting suspended elements of the law would create, quote, an unreasonable risk to staff and inmates, the deal states. The two sides also agreed to minimize and potentially end 24-hour mandatory overtime shifts. Minimize, not eliminate. So 24-hour mandatory overtime shifts essentially still on the table with the possibility of potentially ending it. Staffing and operational inefficiencies will also be examined with the hope of providing more relief to existing staff. The development comes on the 11th day of the strike that has thrown the state prison system into chaos after guards hung up their uniforms over unsafe working conditions. Hochul is stated as saying, working with a mediator, we have reached a consent award to address many of the concerns raised by corrections officers, put DOCCS back on the path to safe operations, respect the rights of incarcerated individuals, and prevent further unsanctioned work stoppages. So again, needing to essentially virtue signal and make sure that she puts in her statement, respecting the rights of incarcerated individuals. Not concerned 11, 12 days ago about the rights of the corrections officers. Because again, I point to the fact that if your boss asks you to work a 24-hour shift, wouldn't you be tempted at least to call the Department of Labor? But not in the scenario of state workers. While the deal reached Thursday is a significant step towards ending the crisis, the striking guards would also need to buy into the agreement since they have claimed the union hasn't protected their interests. So again, this is not a done deal, and this is going to be an ongoing conversation throughout the day and maybe perhaps throughout the program. And I would encourage anyone that has connections to corrections officers, if they, or maybe a corrections officer themselves, if you have a thought or feeling on this, or you know what's going on the ground, I would love to hear from you. So again, this has been reached by the union in Hochul, which to me seems like not much of a deal. Better than it was in the prisons, but still the idea that the whole act would be suspended for 90 days with, after 30 days, kind of a reevaluation. So what happens after 90 days? The full Hull Act goes back in and we're back at square one? Well, at least then the weather may be a little bit warmer for the strikers. The union, the New York State Corrections Officers and Police Benevolent Association, said it didn't approve of the strike, citing state laws that prohibit it for public sector employees in New York. So isn't that interesting when you see Democrats such as Hochul being so pro-union and pro-strike, so many pictures of Hochul at strike lines. Isn't it interesting that when it's a state worker, you have no rights to that strike. You have no rights to reasonable working hours. 24-hour mandatory overtime is acceptable. Now, the striking guards have until Saturday, or their first scheduled shift day after that, to return to work to get a pass on any disciplinary action as part of the agreement. The work stoppage started earlier this month, as we know, and it snowballed. Started with 2 prisons, one being Elmira, of course, and it snowballed. Employees who walked off the job have even ignored a state judge ordering them back to work after Hochul filed a lawsuit against them last week. Over the weekend, state troopers started serving hundreds of guards on strike with summons, and the corrections department threatened to dock their pay and cancel their health insurance. But as we had mentioned, and it's sad that it's gotten to this, first of all, that they were, I think it was, Sheriff Allard said it was out of desperation. They were forced into this out of desperation, that they started the protest on what was arguably the coldest week of the year, going outside and protesting, but so many being interviewed saying, at this point, I don't care if I lose my job. It's become that bad. But easing the 24-hour mandatory overtime, to me, it seems like that may not be as enforced with the way that seems very open-ended in its wording. But as of this morning, this was published by the New York Post at 2 o'clock this morning, Corrections Officers Union, now that's, again, remember, the strikers have said the union does not represent them or has not represented them, so they still have their decision to make. But the Corrections Officers Union and Hochul have reached a deal that perhaps could end the, quote, wildcat prison strike. So your thoughts on that? Now, this ties in with Assemblyman Phil Palmisano, who, and I'm proud to say this on this program, I think, compared to most media outlets, were very ahead of the curve on talking about the Hull Act. We've been talking about it for as long as really the program has been on the air, talking about how dangerous the Hull Act is. We've been at the forefront of talking about it. And one of the people that has been talking about it, of course, is Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. And I wanted to share this with you. Assemblyman Phil Palmisano met with families of corrections officers in Albany, saying it was a privilege to meet with and talk to the spouses and loved ones of COs from all across New York. I told them thank you, something they and our COs do not hear, nor are they shown nearly enough. I also thank them for coming to Albany to share their personal stories of how the safety and security crisis at our state prisons is negatively impacting the quality of life of our COs and their families. It is long past due for New York State to start prioritizing the safety and quality of life of our dedicated COs who work a very dangerous job to keep us safe. I also give them my commitment that I will continue to speak out in support of our COs and their families. I will always have their backs and will continue to advocate for better pay and benefits, including the death gamble, to protect their pensions for their families, which unfortunately Governor Hochul has now vetoed twice. And I'll continue to be vocal and fight for the suspension and full repeal of the failed and dangerous HALT Act so our COs can be safer while doing their jobs. Finally, I just want to thank our COs and their families again for their tremendous sacrifice they make for all of us. Words do not do justice, or words do no justice to express the thanks and debt of gratitude we have and owe to all of you. I thought that was a nice picture with the assemblymen and the families of correction officers who visited Albany. So I thank the assemblyman for sending along that picture. So that is breaking news this morning. Again, though, there are a lot of moving pieces here where it is the union that has accepted this deal. But again, the strikers have said from the beginning that the union does not represent them. And it is interesting that the deal seems relatively weak. So whether or not the people striking, the corrections officers striking, whether or not they accept the deal is yet to be seen. I look forward to hearing from any corrections officers or their families or friends in the audience, and we'll read those to you because I see some comments coming in. I see a lot of waves coming in. I appreciate that. We do have a couple of other New York State issues. We'll see what we're going to talk about next. There's a lot of breaking stories. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We're just getting started. Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back with Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. A couple of quick comments from viewers. Good morning, Frank. Well, good morning, Mark. Sounds like Hochul is trying to sugarcoat things, but it's still a slap in the face as far as the strike. I'm glad you said that, Mark, because that's what it seems like to me. And if you are just joining us, the Corrections Officers Union and Hochul reach a deal, and that doesn't mean anything is done. It'll be interesting to see how the actual corrections officers who have really bucked the union from the beginning, what they have to say, because it gives a 90-day halt to some of the acts. I don't want to say halt. 90-day suspension of some of the HALT Act's provisions, and includes a promise to ease mandatory overtime shifts. What does ease mean? And by the way, the HALT suspension is only, and it's not all HALT, is 90 days. And then after 30 days, it can determine if reinstituting suspended elements of the law would create an unreasonable risk to staff and inmates. And if you read Hochul's comments, I don't want to belabor this because I just talked about it, but making sure to focus on the rights, respect the rights of the incarcerated individuals. Well, when do you respect the rights of the corrections officers that are keeping us safe? I mean, 24-hour mandatory overtime. I saw a sign from one of the protesters, and I thought it was such a great point, that inmates get to see their families more than corrections officers. So we'll see if that takes hold, that deal. Okay, comment from a different viewer. How is a judge still allowed on the bench that grants bail to a police killer? Drummond Francis is back on the streets despite being charged with capital murder in the death of a Harris County deputy after Judge Hillary Unger granted him bond. Well, we have such astute viewers here on the program and such well-read viewers. I was not overly familiar. I heard about the case, but not overly familiar. So I looked it up. A man accused of killing a Harris County, and that's in Texas, sheriff's deputy has been released on bond, rightfully so, drawing sharp criticism from both law enforcement organizations and the deputy's family. This coming from ABC 13 out of Texas. Deputy Fernando Esquada was shot and killed last July in northeast Harris County. 2 men are charged in connection with the death. One of them, Drummond Francis, was released from jail on Wednesday after posting bond. Francis, 27, is charged with capital murder of a police officer. Judge Hillary Unger of the 248th District Court granted Francis a $1 million bond in November, including $500,000 for capital murder and $500,000 for tampering with evidence. This week, Francis posted a bond and was released. Jose Lopez, president of the Harris County Deputies Organization, said the decision is not only a slap in the face to Deputy Esquada's family, but is also undermining the safety of the community and law enforcement officers who risk their lives every day. Doug Griffin, president of the Houston Police Officers Union, said, "I've never seen anyone on a capital murder case of a law enforcement official released on bond. It's ridiculous. Judge Unger should be ashamed of herself." Capital murder is the only crime in Texas for which a judge has the discretion to deny bond. For defendants accused of murdering police officers, it's practically a given. Griffin raised concerns about the risk of Francis failing to appear in court. What happens when the guy doesn't come back to court? This is a capital murder case. It's the worst of the worst. If he doesn't show up, officers have to go back looking for him. What's going to happen then? Is he going to fire upon those officers? He's been placed, for capital murder, he's been placed under house arrest and is required to wear a GPS monitor. I think it goes without saying that Judge Unger's court declined to comment. Unbelievable. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Just, boy, that'll get your blood boiling. I want to go back to New York State for just a moment. Again, proving the point that Hochul is just not up to the responsibilities, up to the job. Did you see what she had to say about congestion pricing? She wanted to act tough. See, it's funny. She talks tough when it comes to going after our dedicated corrections officers. She talks tough when it comes to taxes on everyday working New Yorkers in the form of congestion pricing. We would beg of her to talk tough about actually fixing the problems of New York, focusing on public safety, the mass exodus of people, maybe creating a better business climate. I wish she would talk tough on those, but no. Of course, talk tough on our corrections officers, against them, and talk tough when it comes to attacks on hardworking New Yorkers. She even found the time to, because again, not ready for prime time, not good at the political game, decided to attack New Jersey for no reason. The governor said, "What do we care what New Jersey thinks?" The governor admitted to insulting 9.5 million of her neighbors when she was trying to convince President Trump last week to reverse the decisions to scrap federal approval of the scheme to hit drivers with a $9 fee to enter Manhattan. Hochul said her main gripe with the Trump administration's move was U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy using New Jersey, at least in part, to justify abruptly nixing the toll. Now, Duffy does live in New Jersey with his family. So Governor Hochul was on, of course, of all places, Morning Joe, saying, first of all, the most offensive thing I found in the letter from Sean Duffy was citing New Jersey, saying that they don't like this program. I said, Mr. President, we're both New Yorkers. What do we care what New Jersey thinks? Instantly real. I don't even think she realizes how her tough talk comes off so pathetic. So the host, Willie Geist, said, come on, easy, I'm from New Jersey. And she said, it's a lovely place, but you know what? Your ride in, if you are taking the tunnel, is 48% faster. So I want New Jersey residents to come here. Come. You're part of an important part of our economy. If you're still driving, and although 90% of you take public transit, which is why I need to keep this money coming to invest, the vast majority of you are taking public transit. But if you're driving, I just gave you a gift of time. I just gave you. She supposedly, in this private meeting, told Trump to cough up $15 billion to fix the New York City subways if congestion pricing is cut. Hochul, and again, it's easy for her to say what she said to Trump when she's on Morning Joe, right? But she said, you're going to have to give me $15 billion to invest in the subway system then. If I lose $15 billion that we're able to leverage with the money brought in by congestion pricing, then I won't be able to fix the stations and the repairs, the new buses I need. Let me ask, and I know we have many viewers out there that are not big fans of Trump. We hear from you nearly daily, and I appreciate those comments. You can send them in at any time, and as long as they're clean, which rarely they are. I would love to read them on the air. But even if you're not a fan of Trump, do you believe in a negotiation between Donald J. Trump and Kathy Hochul? Do you believe that Hochul has the upper hand? Do you believe when Hochul goes in there and says, you better cough up $15 billion on Trump? Do you think that Trump even takes that seriously? I think we're going to keep talking about New York. I'm worked up over these New York stories. Again, if you're just joining us, allegedly, the New York Post is breaking the story late last night, or I guess you would say early this morning, that corrections officers the union, and Hochul have reached a deal that would end the strike. But again, the union has never really represented the corrections officers in the strike because they couldn't. And the corrections officers have said from the beginning that the union doesn't really represent them. So what do you think of this story? Do you think the corrections officers will adhere to this deal? It doesn't sound like much of a deal. But let's continue to talk about, and it'll just be quick, but we have a couple of New York State issues that we need to get to. And a breaking story from last night, a federal judge has found that Trump's mass firings of federal probationary workers were likely unlawful. Before you get worked up over that, when you read the decision, I think even the far left media, some that I was watching this morning, are already accepting the fact this probably is not going to stick because the ruling showed, I think, a pretty clear bias. We'll talk about that. Keep the comments, keep the waves coming in, and we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Give them a call today for all your business and home security needs. And we are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. All right, we have a Climate Fact Friday from Bob coming up in just a little bit. Bob, sorry, I didn't have a chance to read it through yet. Good morning. I just added a good morning to two people waving outside. So I will get to that in just a moment, Bob. I don't want you to think I missed it. I just haven't a chance to read it yet, and if I don't read it ahead of time, I'll end up bumbling it. But Mark writes in, comparing Hochul to Harris, I wonder how many times has Hochul visited the prisons and witnessed the problem? Because Harris didn't visit the border correctly, and I bet Hochul did the same. Yeah, Harris did not visit the border, even though she was the border czar. Boy, the new border czar. Tom Homan, the rock star. Okay. Thank you, Mark, by the way. But we will get to your Climate Fact Friday. Thanks, Bob. So I just want to mention this very quickly, but we've talked about the anti-Semitic protests so frequently and how heart-wrenching it is after we saw, especially with the recent hostage release, the remains of hostage released just a few weeks ago. At least 3 were arrested as there were twin anti-Israel protests that merged outside of CUNY's City College campus, causing Governor Hochul's event to be canceled over security fears. Boy, she's got a lot of crises going on, doesn't she? And not handling any of them properly. 2 separate protests from both City College and Barnard, right? Barnard College, where anti-Semitic protesters seized a building. Well, they merged outside a Harlem CUNY campus building, chanting slogans and waving Palestinian flags. Hochul had been scheduled to make a workforce development announcement alongside former New York Representative, oh wow, here's a name I haven't heard in a while, Charlie Rangel, at the building. But officials canceled the event at the last minute amid fears it be disrupted by campus chaos. Despite officials scrapping the event, the protest outside the City College swelled to roughly 70 anti-Israel protesters who tauntingly shouted, "Kathy Hochul, you can't hide. We charge you with genocide." One of the better rhymes. Many yelling, "Long live the Intifada." Now, Governor Hochul is facing pushback over her removal of the Palestinian Studies professor. Yes, the far left upset that she went against a professor that was pushing anti-Semitism. The faculty union at the City University of New York is objecting to Governor Hochul's order to interrupt the hiring process for a Palestinian studies professor, saying the move is an overreach of the governor into academic affairs. Remember, when we talk about these protesters, it's not just the young college kids. It's the faculty, the staff that are encouraging this anti-Semitism. Pro-Palestinian protesters is how the New York Daily News puts it. What it is anti-Israel, anti-American, anti-police. Had planned to confront the governor, but then, of course, she canceled attending that event. James Davis, president of the PSC, Professional Staff Congress, said, "We oppose anti-Semitism and all forms of hate, but this move is counterproductive. It is an overreach of authority to rule an entire area of academic studies out of bounds." So they're upset because it was clearly a anti-Semitic class that they were looking, just in the course description, looking to staff. Kristen Fleming put it like this: Bernard's spoiled protesters expose the spineless leadership of colleges and New York politicians. On the wall, it says, on Wednesday night, dozens of anti-Israel invaders pushed their way into Barnard's College, Millbank Hall, banging drums and chanting "resistance is justified when people are occupied," and other genocidal slogans from the Idiot's Guide to Intifada. On the walls, the masked-up thugs, organized by Columbia University Apartheid Divest, reportedly scribbled cuss words, along with Free Palestine. Since Hamas's barbaric terrorist attack on Israel on October 7th, 2023, rabid pro-Palestinian protesters have terrorized elite college campuses, taking over buildings. But have you noticed how, harassing Jewish students, have you noticed how the media isn't covering this as they once did? Few colleges had the backbone to dish out any meaningful discipline. But this latest march of the resistance, in which they physically assaulted one employee who was sent to the hospital, was sparked after the school expelled two students very deserving of being expelled. Last month, the masked cowards barged into History of Modern Israel, a class at Columbia University, and started handing out anti-Semitic flyers depicting Nazi imagery, including a boot stomping on a Star of David. The stated mission of these students to reinstate their crybaby comrades and the abolition of the corrupt Barnard disciplinary process and complete transparency for current, past, and future disciplinary proceedings. But make no mistake, this was really just a pack of privileged rich kids getting their kicks by creating mayhem, covered by the delusion that it was social justice. And I don't want to go into any more of this because we're already running late. Even our Governor Kathy Hochul, who likes to talk a big game about banning masks and cracking down on anti-Semitism, has learned this. She recently pushed taxpayer-supported Cooney to take down a job listing for a course on Palestinian studies that critics said demonized Israel. But after years of anti-Semitism festering with Cooney, she hasn't cleaned house or forced some meaningful leadership changes there. She offers only mouth statements that are nothing more than Band-Aids. The leadership vacuum has never been more apparent. I couldn't agree more with what Kristen Fleming is saying there, that Governor Hochul, we said at the time, when it came to the mask ban, she said, we're going to take a look at it, because she wanted to act as if she's doing something. It's the same when she says, I'm worried about public safety, so we're going to reform the bail reform, and of course doesn't. It's the same with, actually the only thing that she's actually talked tough on and looks like she may attempt to follow through on is taxing New York drivers in Manhattan, workers in Manhattan, and going against the corrections officers. But to piggyback off that story and these anti-Semitic protests, a shocking new Gallup survey finds that 60% of Democrats are anti-Israel. This is the first time ever for a major U.S. political party. 60% of Democrats are anti-Israel, according to a Gallup survey. Now, if you recall, during the election, it was Van Jones, Obama's former advisor, Van Jones, who said there is a marbling of anti-Semitism in the Democrat Party. More than half of Democrats are anti-Israel, according to a shocking new poll. Only 33% of Democrats surveyed by Gallup said they had a favorable view of Israel, while a whopping 60% said they viewed the Jewish state unfavorably, and 4% had no opinion. Wow. How troubling are those numbers? Now, by comparison, in full disclosure, 83% of Republicans said they had a favorable view of Israel and just 13% unfavorable, with 4% not offering an opinion. Gallup said this year marks the first time any party group has had a majority-level unfavorable rating of Israel, with 60% of Democrats expressing that view. Overall, 54% of Americans surveyed had a favorable view of Israel and 41% unfavorable, which is very, very troubling as well. The youngest voters between the ages of 18 and 34 were the most critical of the Jewish state, with 56% having an unfavorable view. Where do you think that comes from, folks, as we talk about these college protests? Where do you think the view, the negative view of Israel comes from in that 18 to 34-year-old group? Could it be the education system? And I'm not just talking, unfortunately, about the college level. Starting very early on, we've had examples of that for you in the past. So it should come as no surprise that these young people who have been indoctrinated with this anti-Israel hate would have this view. But again, I just want to reiterate that before we go to a break. Gallup has found that 60% of Democrats are anti-Israel. One last New York story when we come back, and then we're going to get into Trump. As we had mentioned at the beginning of the program, the Correction Officers Union and Governor Hochul have reached a deal that could end the strike. Very important to emphasize, could end the strike. The union has not, and the corrections officers have said that, has not represented them from the beginning of this. It just suspends certain aspects of the Hull Act for 90 days with after 30 day, there's going to be a review if they could start putting some of the suspended items back into play. And it would also minimize and potentially end, which I wouldn't put too much money on that, but minimize the 24-hour mandatory overtime shifts. So if you are a CO or you know a CO, I would love to hear your thoughts on that. One more New York State issue, and then we're going to move along to Trump. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking roof cam. Look at that beautiful view of historic Market Street. Thank you to Boss Security for bringing us that view. You can contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Is this hour going quickly or what? Okay. Couple comments. Good morning. Climate Fact Friday from Bob. Thanks, Bob. Our government just will stop at nothing. Now, NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, has gotten millions of dollars in the past few years to, guess what? Yes, manipulate the climate, cool the planet. Although they say they do not conduct geoengineering, they are in charge of permitting and regulating the NGOs that do, which is geoengineering. This is where chemicals such as sulfur dioxide and aluminum oxide are injected into the stratosphere to reflect sunlight back into space in order to cool the planet. These chemicals will eventually fall to the ground in the form of acid rain. What could go wrong? Thank you, Bob. Comment from a different viewer. Why would President Trump give one of the most fiscally irresponsible governors in New York State history a penny? Yeah, that's why the negotiation, let's face it. When she said, allegedly, it's easy for her to say this on Morning Joe, but when she allegedly told Donald Trump, well, if you don't want congestion pricing, then give me $15 billion for the subway system. Normally I say I'd like to be a fly on the wall for some of these meetings. I think that one would be boring. I think she's so outmatched. I don't think it would even be fun to watch. I almost think it would be awkward, like many of her press conferences and interviews, awkward to watch. One last New York State issue. It's 6:40, folks, on a Friday morning. I almost don't even want to do this to you, but I'm going to. According to thehill.com, Andrew Cuomo, seen as possible White House candidate by some Democrats. Former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is days away from potentially entering the New York City's mayor race. But even before Cuomo was set to make that announcement, some Democrats are already tossing around his name for a bigger race, the 2028 presidential campaign. Now, if I had to guess who some of those Democrats are, they would be in Cuomo's inner circle. If you recall, Cuomo was contemplating running before COVID. What would it have been? Would it have been 2016 that he was contemplating running? He was polling at less than 1% nationwide, and he was still talking about it. This is the ego, the narcissism of this man. Now, I jokingly, this is a true story. The Hill is reporting it. And we laugh at it, but it's not laughable because, again, like Elise Stefanik essentially said, he should never hold elected office again because of his decision to put COVID-infected patients in nursing homes and never accepting responsibility, hiding the numbers, fabricating numbers, would not apologize to the families of those that died in the nursing home because of his decision. Because of his arrogance and his ego, his narcissism, words that I can't use on the air, he still does not look at that as a scandal, does not look at that as a stain on his reputation. That was happening. The most vulnerable among us were dying in droves because of his decision, and he was busy ordering his staff to write his book so he could get that $5 million deal. And there are actually Democrats, according to The Hill, that believe he could run for president. Does not surprise me at all to think that he would think he could. That's why we've said, and I have a bad feeling about this, but that New York City should not vote him in, because if they do, that is not the end. That is not where he hangs his hat, hangs up his shingle, and retires from. He will either go back, try to run for governor, or, according to this piece from The Hill, run for president. Since their loss in November, writes The Hill, Democrats have been anxious to find a voice not only to lead them out of the wilderness, but also stand up to President Trump. An article like this must drive Hochul crazy because she wants that kind of name recognition that Cuomo had, and she just doesn't have it. Clearly, just watched that Morning Joe interview. She just does not have that oomph that you need. Not ready for prime time. And I don't think Cuomo has it either, but for some reason, Democrats have always latched on. There was some heavy-hitting Democrat that was just announced yesterday switching their support from Adams to Cuomo. I don't get it. But Cuomo, with his brash, in-your-face style, they say, could shape up to be a dark horse candidate in what is set to be a wide-open race. In many ways, they say, it would be reminiscent of spring 2020, when Cuomo faced off with Trump during the height of COVID-19, when both men lobbed frequent barbs at each other. Yeah, except for at the time, Trump was trying to help New Yorkers and save New Yorkers by sending that ship, where Cuomo was killing off New Yorkers by putting COVID-positive patients in nursing homes. I would say that's a little different than now in 2020. Yes, the media loved Cuomo because the media's left, far left. Remember the hype around him because he had those press conferences daily? But remember, Democrats were saying at the time, maybe it's ironic to look at it now through the lens of history, they wanted Biden, some did, wanted Biden to step aside and let Cuomo in there to run against Trump. Interesting to think how things may have been different. Quote, if Andrew Cuomo becomes mayor of New York, he could very well be Trump's chief, did it get cut off? Chief something. Cuomo resigned from office in 2021 after he faced sexual harassment allegations and a rash of criticism surrounding the way he reported COVID-19 deaths in his state. Oh, again, don't mention the nursing home. They're already propping him up. And then since then, he's kept a low public profile, which I would argue that that's not accurate either. One Democrat strategist said, I don't think we're looking for purity anymore, or we shouldn't be. We need someone who's a strong messenger, who knows how to communicate to the public and is willing to put on the gloves and punch. So there you are. Democrat strategist Basil Smikle said, I think one of Andrew's strongest qualities is that people feel like he's fighting for them. And that's the uniqueness of this moment. Candidates can't just sell their good governances. They have to be in the fight, and he proved that during the first Trump administration, he could be in that fight. There we go. I don't think it needs any more commentary. Andrew Cuomo, seen as a possible White House candidate by some Democrats. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. All right, we're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Thank you for joining us this morning. We got a lot of waves, a lot of comments coming in. Let's go to a couple of the comments. Watched the interview with Trump just before the Super Bowl, and he admitted that he did some things wrong during his first term. But when it comes to Hochul, she will never admit her laws are wrong. No, she won't. And as a matter of fact, I think a lot of that is because she's scared, such as, and now bail reform is not specifically her law, but she has been governor for how many years now? She can reform that, the bail reform, but she won't do it because she's scared of Albany. She's scared of the far left in her party that run Albany. Got an idea. Trump could pay Hochul with Trump $250 bills, the monopoly money. Yeah, the suggestion made, was that by Joe Wilson? I think so. That making the $250 bill with Trump's picture on it. Another comment. Good morning, Frank. Well, good morning. Michael Cohen was once considered a Democrat presidential candidate. That was just before his federal conviction for tax evasion. That's a great reminder, Fred. Thank you. You are exactly right. Yesterday, the federal judge found that Trump's mass firings of federal probationary workers were likely unlawful. This is frustrating. It's something that Trump was prepared for, though. He wasn't as prepared his first term on this, which was ready for all the lawfare. The judges to step in and believe that they are more powerful, more important, making better decisions than the President of the United States. But a federal judge, where was this federal judge from? San Francisco, found that the mass firings of probationary employees were, quote, likely unlawful, granting temporary relief to a coalition of labor unions and organizations that had sued to stop the Trump administration's massive dismantling of the federal workforce. U.S. District Judge William Alsup ordered the Office of Personnel Management to inform certain federal agencies that it had no authority to order the firings of probationary employees, including at the Department of Defense. Just to show you kind of the level of arrogance and ignorance on this from this judge, listen to how snarky this statement reads. OPM does not have any authority whatsoever under any statute in the history of the universe to hire or fire an employee but its own. The complaint filed by 5 labor unions and 5 nonprofit organizations is among multiple lawsuits pushing back on the administration's efforts to shrink a workforce that Trump has called bloated and sloppy. It is amazing how the left comes out in defense for the bloated government, for the waste, fraud, and corruption of the federal government. I mean, talk about fighting tooth and nail. Thousands of probationary employees have already been fired, and Trump's administration is now aiming at career officials with civil service protection. Lawyers for the government agree that the office has no authority to hire or fire employees in other agencies, but they said the Office of Personnel Management asked agencies to review and determine whether employees on probation were fit for continued employment. They also said that probationary employees are not guaranteed employment and that only the highest performing and mission-critical employees should be hired. Kelsey Helland, an assistant U.S. attorney, said, I think plaintiffs are conflating a request by OPM with an order by OPM. This is another activist judge, this one out of San Francisco, that found, surprisingly, that Trump was in the wrong. By the way, I should mention Alsup, who is the judge, was appointed by President Bill Clinton and has presided over many high-profile cases and is known for his blunt talk. I guess that's what blunt talk is in the history of the universe. He said probationary employees are the lifeblood of our government, adding that they are younger employees who work their way up. So the lifeblood. This doesn't seem like a guy that has any kind of bias here. Man, it's amazing to me to see the Democrats have this fight to make sure that the government stays bloated, stays wasteful. We got to take our last break of hour number one. Where does the time go on Frankly Speaking? We're having a blast this morning. Got a lot of comments coming in, which we will read after this. So stay with us. We'll be right back. The Frankly Speaking roof cam, giving you that beautiful view of historic Market Street. Thank you to Boss Security for bringing us that view. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Let's go to some viewer comments before we wrap up hour number one with a couple of announcements before we go into hour number two. But first, comments. As the son of a parent affected by COVID in a nursing home, I cannot express the amount of damage it does not only to the residents, but also the staff. Never forget what Cuomo did. Thank you. I'm sorry that you had to go through that situation. I'm telling you, when you hear Janice Dean talk about the horrors of what her family went through because of Cuomo's decision, you think of all those people that could not say goodbye to their loved ones because of Governor Cuomo's decision, and then his arrogance and not admitting, not even having the decency to apologize to people that were affected by that decision, still acts as if he did nothing wrong, even though he covered up the numbers because he knew he did something wrong. It's despicable. And the fact that there are Democrats that think that he should run for president, and the fact that he is running for mayor, and I think and I hope I eat crow after Election Day. I hope you can all laugh at what I'm saying, but I have a horrible I have a horrible feeling that the New York City voters will decide, that's where that word came from, to select and elect former Governor Cuomo to mayor. It is outrageous. I hate even saying it, but unfortunately, I feel that he will be the next mayor of New York City. Please, after Election Day, text in and laugh at how ignorant I was with that prediction. Make me eat crow on that, please. Ken writes in, watching the Democrats' reaction to Trump's actions and Doge's work, it reinforces a saying that I heard many years ago. Not all horse thieves are Democrats, but all Democrats are horse thieves. Thank you, Ken. I appreciate that. And finally, how much money did Newsom give the judge in San Francisco? And did it come out of the $50 million he raised to fight Trump? That's a great question. Thank you for that. Yeah, that decision, let's face it, I don't think I was surprised. Were you? That decision coming from that judge? I know they're making a big deal on the news now about it. But even when you hear the way they say it, you can kind of hear the defeat in their voices, knowing that it's a temporary block. Let's see. Do I want to mention it? No, we're going to come back. I'll mention, I have a couple things that you can do this weekend. And I don't want you to miss out, so we don't have the time to bring it up right now, but I'll bring it up in a little bit. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Hour number two, actually. Hour number one already somehow in the book, so stay with us. Well, it's hour number two of Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We're broadcasting live, as you know. We're broadcasting live and proudly from the Hesselson studio on Market Street in Corning. If you are just joining us, and we had mentioned this quite a bit in the last hour, but we have a little more information from when we originally went on the air. But a deal has been struck to end the New York Corrections Officer strike, and that is according to the governor. But the officers' union did not authorize the strike, and it was unclear how it would enforce the agreement. The stoppage has affected, I didn't know this, all but one of the state's 42 prisons. I wonder who the last holdout was. Anybody know that off the top of their head? Who was the one of the 42 prisons in New York State that did not participate in this? New York State authorities and a union representing corrections officers have reached a deal to end the most widespread strike in the state's prison in more than 4 decades. It was unclear how the union would enforce the agreement, as it did not authorize the stoppage. The striking officers also defied a judge's order earlier this month to return to work. Yeah, I wonder, and I don't know. I don't want to speak for corrections officers. And we are going to read your comments, by the way. I don't want to speak for corrections officers, but first of all, the deal doesn't sound like that good of a deal. Basically, it suspends some of the provisions of the HALT Act for 90 days, not permanently, for 90 days, and then gets reviewed 30 days in to see if they can start piecing more of, putting some of those pieces back into place. So it's not really a 90-day halt even. I hate that I keep using the word halt. It's not a 90-day suspension even, because after 30 days, they start looking to see if some of those provisions can be put back into place. So this does not seem like great negotiation from the unions. Maybe, correct me if I'm wrong. You tell me, you may have a better insight to this. I know we have a great contingent of corrections officers that watch this show and used to listen on radio. Your thoughts, will the COs accept this offer? Will they continue to strike? Does it seem like a good deal? The other part was an easing and potential end to. It says potential. An easing of the 24-hour mandatory overtime. What is the easing? 23 hours? Does it mean, oh, we're only going to give you 24 hours once a week? What does that mean? It just does not seem like the union struck much of a deal. But again, I've never been a union member, so I'm not sure what is expected normally in these positions. Corrections officers began a series of wildcat strikes on February 17 at the Collins and Elmira Correctional Facility over what they described as severe staff shortages, dangerous conditions, and excessive mandatory overtime. The stoppages spread to all but one of the state's 42 prisons, and Governor Hochul deployed National Guard troops to help address the staffing shortage. Through mediation, the state reached an agreement with the union for a consent award to address the officer's complaint. Governor Hochul said in a statement, as I mentioned earlier, the award includes changes to improve staffing and reduce mandatory overtime. The award by the arbiter, Martin Scheinman, followed 4 days of mediation proceedings involving the State Corrections Department and the union. Under the award, the Corrections Department would not discipline striking workers as long as they returned to work by Saturday. That seems to be the only thing, not the only thing, but that seems to be the biggest positive takeaway, is that you won't be disciplined. What did they say? 9 out of 10 corrections officers have been on the strike at some point. We heard yesterday. I don't know. I would love to hear your thoughts on this because it is the biggest story in our area, and rightfully so. The corrections officer not getting the respect that they deserve. And can you imagine being told you have to work 24 hours and that happening on a frequent basis? Unbelievable. Okay. Let's read some viewer comments. Fred writes in, it seems that all politicians have law degrees as well as a team of lawyers around them. It seems to me that could be why Cuomo can never apologize for the nursing home issue, because that could be an admission of responsibility, which could then be used in court. That's a good point, Fred, but I don't know. I don't know how you sleep at night after that decision. You know, people make wrong decisions, but to double and triple down on it, and a decision that cost so many people their lives, and so many people lost a loved one that they couldn't see, couldn't say goodbye to, and then to just act as if it's nothing, just brushing it off. I don't know. I don't know how you sleep at night. I really don't. Let alone run for mayor and potentially president. And that's what our next viewer weighs in on. Good morning. Well, hey, good morning. Go ahead, Democrats. Let Cuomo run for president. He would not make it out of the primaries. They would eat him alive. Parasites eating the parasites. Thank you very much, viewer. Let me see. Okay. This is just an update. I am not going to get through everything today. This is just an update from yesterday's program. This is something that I took a moment to highlight yesterday on the program. And House Speaker Mike Johnson reiterated, maybe he was watching, frankly speaking, if he was, thank you, Speaker. He said that the recent anti-GOP protests at various town halls were paid for by Democrats. The videos you saw of the town halls were for paid protesters in many of those places. These are Democrats who went to the events early and filled up the seats. Now, Caitlin Collins, this was on CNN that he said this. Caitlin Collins said that Johnson could not argue that they were all paid protesters, adding that a Republican acknowledged they were his constituents. So Johnson shot back, one Republican acknowledged that they were constituents. That's fantastic. Okay. But they had Democrats come and fill the seats early, all right? This is an old playbook that they pulled out and ran. And it made it look like this was happening, and what was happening in Washington is unpopular. And this is what we spoke on yesterday. What happens, and we've seen it numerous times. My first clear recollection of it was when Move On came around and was constantly disrupting George W. Bush events and town halls. So what they're essentially trying to do, and I'm not going to say they're all paid either. I don't necessarily agree with that. It's just people that are very active in the far left wing of the Democrat Party. And they're, organized. They're the resistance, just like they were back in Trump's first term. And they mail out the people that have donated to their groups in the past or that have been active in their groups in the past, and they say, we want to go to a Republican representative's town hall to disrupt it. We need people to tape it so then we can send it to the mainstream media. They can then present it as everybody hates Trump's policies. And what they really want to do is do this in a very Republican-heavy district. So they'll go to a red area, and I saw it. I mean, and I'm sure you have too on the news, where it'll say in heavy red wherever, heavy red district, the GOP congressman slammed by his constituents, presenting a lie, and this is what the media does, presenting a lie that all of the people at the town hall were once Republicans. They were from a Republican area, so that means they must have voted for Trump, but now they hate Trump. It's so predictable, and we've seen it played out time and time again. But I'm glad that Mike Johnson is calling it like it is and telling viewers of CNN who may not normally hear this position, telling them exactly what it is. As noted by The Hill, Speaker Johnson issued his comment after the House GOP narrowly passed its budget blueprint, which would stave off a government shutdown next month and advance Trump's priorities forward. Representative Glenn Grothman of Wisconsin was specifically challenged at an event last week about topics such as Medicaid and Social Security cuts. Tough questions about government layoffs were also lobbed at Representative Rich McCormick from his constituents at a town hall meeting last week. So it's so predictable. But I just wanted to kind of, use Mike Johnson's words there to reiterate what we were saying yesterday. By the way, I know many are disappointed this morning that the Jeffrey Epstein documents were kind of a dud. But rest assured, Pam Bondi says that she is demanding the full documents be turned over and that the FBI has withheld thousands of pages. She's demanding that those be released to her by 8 a.m. this morning. Bondi disclosed in a letter to Kash Patel, the new FBI director, that a tipster said that all but approximately 200 pages of documents were still being kept secret at the FBI's office in New York. So all but approximately 200 pages, despite her repeated requests for the full Epstein file. The initial batch included flight logs, phone numbers, and the names of victims. But a source in the FBI's New York office reached out and said that hundreds additional documents were not included. So she stated, by 8 a.m. tomorrow, February 28th, meaning today, the FBI will deliver the full and complete Epstein files to my office, including all records, documents, audio, and video recordings, and materials related to Jeffrey Epstein and his clients, regardless of how much information was obtained. There will be no withholdings or limitations to my or your access, she vowed to Patel. Representative Andy Ogles from Tennessee has floated a bill to prevent non-public records on Epstein housed at the Department of Justice from being destroyed, according to a copy of the letter concerns that they could be by the way, the act that Ogles is pushing through, because there's concern that the documents could be destroyed, announced that he was drafting legislation of the Preventing Epstein Documentation Obliteration Act, or the PEDO Act, following reports that certain FBI agents are allegedly attempting to destroy critical records. A former FBI special agent has suggested that the Epstein files could be among documents during a recent interview on the conservative influencer Benny Johnson's podcast that were being destroyed. So directing Kash Patel, Bondi, directing FBI Director Kash Patel to no longer withhold the Epstein files. She's not blaming him specifically. But Bondi began her letter saying, "Before you came into office, I requested the full and complete files related to Jeffrey Epstein. In response to that request, I received approximately 200 pages of documents, which consisted primarily of flight logs, Epstein's list of contacts, and a list of victims' names and phone numbers. I repeatedly questioned whether this was a full set of documents responsive to my request, and was repeatedly assured by the FBI that we have received the full set of documents. Late yesterday, I learned from a source that the FBI field office in New York was in possession of thousands of pages of documents related to the investigation and the indictment of Epstein. Despite my repeated requests, the FBI never disclosed the existence of these files." Bondi noted that she had already spoken to Patel after receiving the tip, writing that the FBI director was just as surprised as I was to learn this new information. By 8 a.m. tomorrow, February 28th, the FBI will deliver the full and complete Epstein files to my office, including all records, documents, audio and video recording, and materials related to Jeffrey Epstein and his clients, regardless of how much information was obtained. I'm also directing you to conduct an immediate investigation into why my order to the FBI was not followed. You will deliver to me a comprehensive report of your findings and proposed personnel action within 14 days. In her conclusion, Bondi added that she knows that Patel is committed to transparency for the American people. A source also has claimed that Bondi and Patel are 100% on the same page. I don't think anybody is blaming Patel in this. Obviously, he has just got to the job. But this is an example, and I've got another example of it that's going to make you furious. But this is an example of the alleged deep state, as the media always puts it, working against Trump's orders, Trump's demands. And like I said, I have other updates on that, but we should get more information on that soon. Full faith in Pam Bondi and Kash Patel to release those, but it doesn't tell you a lot when there's FBI agents behind the scenes. You know, this is what makes it so interesting about Democrats. Are so outraged that so many employees are being let go, and that that they're cutting back on the bureaucracy. And then out of the same breath, we're hearing these stories of, well, the FBI didn't release all the information to the Attorney General because they knew better than the Attorney General, apparently, or Trump, or maybe they had some connection, or they know somebody powerful that had some connection to Epstein. Who knows? But then we'll have Politico say, make sure you bureaucrats work against Trump's agenda. But all the while, the media is denying that there's any kind of deep state. Isn't that fascinating? I would not want to be on that side of the argument. Again, coming up a little bit later on, we will be talking about a couple of events this weekend that I don't want you to forget about. Also, if you are just joining us, the Corrections Officers Union and Hochul have reached a deal that could end the strike. Your thoughts on, will it end the strike? This was a deal made by a union that has in no way, shape, or form been able to take part in the strike, did not sanction the strike. The deal to me does not seem to be adequate, but I am not a corrections officer member, and I've never been a union member. So your thoughts on that. But we do have to take a break because we're running late. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. I just want to quickly mention that there's very exciting hockey coming up this Saturday. Our good friends at the Elmira Impact, if you recall, they rang the bell at the original telethon. We've had some interviews with them in the past. They are having, I should put it up on the screen, playoff hockey this weekend. And I wanted to mention it to you. You recall in the past, we helped them look for homes for the students, Well, here you go. The USPHL playoff hockey returns to Elmira for the first time since 2021 when the Elmira Impact Premier Team, which is number 2 in the Atlantic, hosts the PAL Junior Islanders at the Domes this Saturday. The best-of-3 first-round series begins Saturday at 8 p.m. and continues Sunday at 2 p.m. If a third game is necessary, that will be Monday at noon. All games are at the Domes. Hard-hitting, fast-paced USPHL hockey. Anyone of any age wearing anything repping a local youth hockey program will be admitted to the games free of charge, and all kids 12 and under are always free. So there you are. There's your information for our friends at Elmira Impact. Okay, let's get right back to it. What are your thoughts on this? According to a new poll, studyfinds.org, 2 in 5 Americans say living in the U.S. is no longer enjoyable. Millennials emerged as the group most eager to move internationally, with a quarter wanting to relocate abroad, higher than any other generation surveyed. That comes as no surprise because think of what they've been taught, just like these anti-Semitic protests, they've been taught how bad America is and how great it is elsewhere. So I guess, sadly, 2 in 5 Americans say living in the U.S. is no longer enjoyable. Trump and Zelensky are to meet today for that key deal as NATO allies and Russia wait and watch. Ukraine President Zelensky is set to meet with President Trump today for the first time since he re-entered the White House, meaning Trump, to sign what could be a key minerals deal to help end the Russian war. Though some details of the agreement have emerged since the meeting was announced this week, the exact terms remain unclear, and European leaders, including Putin, are waiting to see what could come out of this agreement, particularly when it comes to security demands. Trump on Wednesday told reporters that Zelensky could forget about any ambitions to join NATO, but the Ukraine president also said that day that he needs security guarantees, otherwise we won't have a ceasefire, nothing will work, nothing. So we'll keep a close eye on that. Let's talk about Doge, shall we? We mentioned the judge saying that firing probationary employees likely unlawful. We know as an activist judge, we saw this a lot during Trump's first term. So I don't think anybody was surprised by the news that a San Francisco judge appointed by Bill Clinton had made that decision. But we learned this morning, well, actually late yesterday, that the Doge dividend check could become law. And I know we've had some back and forth on this with viewers. Some people want the check. Some people want the money to be used to pay down the debt of this country. And then, of course, Trump saying, well, we're going to do that, but we're going to take 20% and give it back to the American people. Well, the proposal for the American taxpayer, hopefully it is laser-like focused on the taxpayers and not just everyone, but the proposal for a Doge dividend, which would distribute 20% of government savings to taxpayers, has gained support from President Trump and Elon Musk, and now it could potentially be enshrined in law. The 28-year-old hedge fund manager behind the idea, James Fishback, said he met with Elon Musk last week and began meeting with lawmakers about his idea earlier this week. Quote, the president supports this, and Elon likes the idea of incentivizing people to report waste, fraud, and abuse. The proposed bill will be coming in the next few days. He added this approach will save taxpayers even more money. It would compound the returns that Doge is finding. Under Fishback's proposal, households that are net taxpayers, those who pay into the government more than they receive in benefits, would receive 20% of all Doge's savings. Another 20% will go to paying down the national debt, and the other 60% would likely be allocated to the budget each year. Fishback doesn't explicitly state that, though. According to his math, that would mean roughly 79 million households would get a $5,000 check each if Musk is able to cut $2 trillion from the federal budget he's estimated that he can trim. Fishback has previously suggested the first check could come when Doge terminates in July 2026, but it became law before then. Americans could get a check even sooner. Elon Musk quote tweeted the idea and shared his support for the idea on X, while Trump passed the idea in a speech last week. Now, I had mentioned the kind of the bureaucracy, and we see the Democrat Party fighting for that bureaucracy, fighting for kind of the waste, fraud, corruption, hitching their wagon to that belief that we need a more bloated government. But we've talked about with these nameless faceless bureaucrats what they can do to try to hinder and hurt the Trump agenda. And the media will continue to say alleged deep state, or with no evidence, Trump suggests there's a deep state. You've heard it all. They want to write off this idea that there's a deep state or swamp. But then Politico accidentally let the secret out by saying, hey, bureaucrats, nameless, faceless, unelected bureaucrats, try to hinder Trump's administration. Do everything you can to slow down his agenda. Essentially admitting to the deep state at that point. And then you see people like Chuck Schumer saying, you know what, it's not right that an unelected person in Elon Musk is cutting jobs of unelected bureaucrats. It's a constitutional crisis. It's very weird. But to again prove the existence of a deep state, as Trump would call it, The Guardian writes, the secret network of federal workers resisting Doge from the inside. This piece coming out yesterday. How could that be if there's no deep state? Or how could that be if the government, the federal employees aren't working against the president? Government employees fight the Trump administration's chaos. Going to be a lot of cliches in this Guardian piece, folks. Organizing and publishing information on Blue Sky. Now, if you're not familiar with Blue Sky, it's a social media outlet where the leftists turn to it because it's basically a bubble of other people and their leftist ideas, which is why people like Stephen Colbert are popular, because that's what apparently the Democrat Party likes, is just like-minded people around them with no difference of opinion whatsoever. Seems kind of like a boring way to live, but that's their decision. After seeing Elon Musk's X post on Saturday afternoon about an email that would soon land in the inboxes of 2.3 million federal employees, asking them to list 5 things they did the week before, a clandestine network of employees and contractors at dozens of federal agencies began talking on an encrypted app about how to respond. Employees on a 4-day, 10 hours a day schedule wouldn't even see the email until Tuesday, past the deadline for responding, some noted. There was also a bit of snark, bonus points to anyone who responds that they spent their government subsidy on, well, we'll just say inappropriate stuff, said one worker. Within hours, the network had agreed on a recommended response. Break up the oath federal employees take when hired into 5 bullet points and send them back in an email. 1, I supported and defended the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. 2, I bore true faith and allegiance to the same, and so on. It was only the latest effort by a growing and increasingly busy group banding together to expose harmful policies, defend public institutions, and equip citizens with tools to push back against authoritarianism. According to Lynn Stahl, increasingly, the group is also trying to help its members and others face the thousands of layoffs that have been imposed across the federal government. So, again, told and lectured that there is no deep state, that no one's working against the president, the government, that they're just public servants. These public servants, and Lynn Stahl makes it pretty clear, they know better than the voter. They know better than the president of the United States, who was elected in a landslide in November. They know better, so therefore they are defending public institutions and equipping citizens with tools to push back against authoritarianism. Keep in mind, these people doing this behind the scenes, from the inside, you're paying for their salary. You're paying for their benefits. And then we're supposed to feel bad when the media points out the worst scenario of someone getting laid off, the person that was living paycheck to paycheck or whatever the case. When this piece from The Guardian, just like the Politico piece before it, coming right out and saying what has been quoted by the president numerous times as the deep state, the secret network of federal workers resisting Doge from the inside. Again, you are paying for these unelected, nameless, faceless bureaucrats' salaries. You're paying them to hinder the administration that you may have voted for. If you're a Trump supporter and you voted for Trump, they are using your tax dollars to fight the agenda that you support and that the American voters supported in November. And they're not presenting this piece as a negative. The Guardian is encouraging it. This is to be looked at as a glowing piece, that this is a good thing, that, go get them, nameless, faceless, unelected bureaucrat. We got to take a short break. Stay with us. We will be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. Hey, don't forget, I know you watched the program yesterday. Colton Hillman was our guest. Don't forget to all of our Chemung County viewers, if you are a Republican, Saturday is a wings and petition drive. And it's not just for Republicans if you want to meet the candidates. What this is a great idea. You go to the White Eagles Club. You get to meet some of the local Republican candidates running for office and get to sign their petition because the candidates will be out on the street getting signatures too. When I say out in the street, knocking door to door, don't get me wrong. But this is just a way for you to go to them and have a great discussion and you get wings out of the deal from the White Eagle Club. So I just wanted to remind you, in case you missed the interview yesterday or if it escaped your mind, the Wings and Petition Drive hosted by the Chemung County Republican Committee is tomorrow at the White Eagle Club, and that is from 2 to 5 p.m. Okay. Let's go to some viewer comments. A lot of great viewer comments. Ken writes in, the only way that the Democrats, unelected bureaucrats, and legacy media will stop the threats, lies, misinformation, and general chaos that they are mounting against the Trump administration is when the sheeple start seeing how they have been lied to. When the sheeple see the credible information released on how corrupt the leaders they elected are and how they have been using them and every other American as their personal cash cows, the Democrats will lose their power. The only chance we have on getting our country back is Trump completing what he started in 2016, draining the swamp. And that's such a good point. I mean, we talked about it yesterday with the government-issued credit cards, putting the 30-day hold on that. Think of how much money is being wasted and how easy it would be to skim from the top when you're talking billions. What was that, $40 billion spent last year using those credit, or spent would be right, using those credit cards. Thank you, Ken. Comment from a different viewer. Hochul and the Corrupt Corrections Officers Union may have come to agreement, but the line officers aren't in agreement. The union has sold its members out and is part of the tyrant's team. That's sounding like it's coming from a corrections officer. Thank you very much, and that's in reference, if you are just joining, the Corrections Officer Union and Governor Hochul have reached a deal that could end the Wildcat prison strike. To me, and we talked about it throughout the whole morning, it seems to me as not only not a good deal, but also it seems like there's no real agreement with the corrections officer. This is a mediator who came to it. I don't see where Hochul really gave up much of anything. You talk about suspending portions of the HALT Act for 90 days, but after 30 days, they start to look and see if anything can safely be put back into effect. So really, it's really only a 30-day suspension. Also, isn't that interesting? If they can safely be put into effect. Well, if something wasn't safe to begin with, why was it in there? If you have to kind of dip your toe into water to see if something's safe from a HALT Act that's been in effect for, since 2021 or 2022, why should there be any aspects that you have to test to see if it's safe? It should have all been safe. But anyway, and then easing, not banning, but easing mandatory 24-hour overtime shifts. Yeah, I don't know because I'm not on the ground there, but it doesn't seem to me that the corrections officers, because the union has not spoke for them from the beginning. It just doesn't seem like something that's going to end the strike. But I could be wrong, and we'll know more on Monday. Comment from a different viewer. The 2 in 5 unhappy Americans have obviously been reading books written by Hillary, Cuomo, and Comey. There are planes leaving for South America daily. Thank you very much for that. Comment from a different viewer. I think the quality of life will definitely improve with Trump in charge, but New Yorkers have to turn their attention to their home state. Yeah, there has to be a focus as we near 2026, which is when the governor's race will take place. Right now, Mike Lawler, who, in full disclosure, this is not the right word to say, but has not declared that he is running for governor. So he is not declared yet, but many people are speculating, but he has not declared. He's within 8 points of Governor Hochul as of now. I think she does have a tough road ahead of her. Comment from a different viewer. I have traveled for work to many countries in the last 30 years. There are few equal and none better than the United States. I saw real people and places, not just the tourist areas. Well, thank you very much. I would say there are none better than the United States. So I appreciate your comment. Thank you. Comment from a different viewer. A former friend of mine who suffers from severe TDS, Trump Derangement Syndrome, has doubled down on her vile hatred for Elon Musk and Doge, posting blatant lies that come from MSNBC and Politico. It's her prerogative because we're allowed our opinion. But what makes it hard for me is that she is a teacher. So I worry about our children. Yeah, that's why you have 2 and 5, and specifically millennials, a high number of millennials that do not want to live in this country anymore. That's why you see the anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, anti-American protests on college campuses. The list goes on and on. So I can understand your worry for the future generations. Okay. We were talking Elon Musk. This kind of maybe something to that last viewer's comment could have been posted by their friend. Joy Behar rips Elon Musk on The View, calling him a pro-apartheid enemy of the state. Then, embarrassingly, with hat in hand, walked back her comments that she made about Elon Musk. So she calls him pro-apartheid, a foreign agent, and an enemy of the state. Quote, this guy was not born in this country. Who was born under apartheid in South Africa? So he has that mentality going on. He was pro-apartheid, as I understand it. Behar escalated the incendiary comments, characterizing Musk, who was tapped by President Trump to head the cost-cutting agency, as a foreign agent and an enemy of the state. But just after a commercial break, Behar quickly shifted her tone and began backtracking on the bombastic and possibly defamatory statements. This is because, folks, of the lawsuits that Trump has been successful in against organizations, news organizations, pushing outright lies against him. He's not sitting idly by while they push these lies. So she realizes her company's already been in trouble. Others, like I said, George Stephanopoulos should have a brick dedicated to him at the Trump Presidential Library because of that lawsuit. $15 million going to the Trump Presidential Library. So now Joy Behar realizes, she can't just spew lies anymore. The Wild Wild West days are over. She said, now I'm getting some flack because I said that Musk was pro-apartheid. I don't really know for sure if he was. He grew up at that time when apartheid was in full bloom, before the great Nelson Mandela fixed that. He was around at that time, but maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. He might have been a young guy too. So don't be suing me, okay, Elon? They're allowed to say any lie they want, but we have to be really strict. So pathetic. One social media user had made a great point. The I combine the libs and Democrat. The libs are anti-immigration now, said one user. This is pure gold. Elon Musk has transformed Joy Behar into a critic of immigration. Others calling her comments bigoted and toxic. Don't sue me. That's one of the huge benefits of Trump going after the media that has been lying about him, because they can no longer spew their lies. I think it is hilarious, though, that she claims that they can lie about anything, but we have strict standards. You have strict standards at The View? No kidding. You don't say? Since when? Suspect, to show you more of this hate and this unhinged behavior, a suspect is accused of, oh my goodness, I'm running late. A suspect is accused of throwing explosive devices at Tesla vehicles and defacing, quote, Nazi cars at dealerships. Police arrested a 40-year-old woman accused of spray painting a Tesla dealership with the words Nazi cars and throwing Molotov cocktails at vehicles on the property in the latest apparent protest against the chief executive, Elon Musk. Getting dangerous out there. Stay with us. We'll read your comments when we come back. We're running just a tad bit late. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking roof cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio on Marcus Street in Corning. As we were talking Doge, Vivek Ramaswamy, who is running for governor of Ohio, discussed this hostility towards Doge, like we just heard from Joy Behar, with that vile rant against immigration. apparently. And then we just heard about the suspect accused of throwing explosive devices at Tesla vehicles because of Musk. Vivek Ramaswamy said it comes from a place of irrationality. For the last several years, people have had Trump derangement syndrome. That derangement syndrome has now expanded to include Elon and others. That new golden age in our country will also be a golden age for federalism. Just kick it down to the states. That's what our founders envisioned. Get it out of Washington, D.C. And I think that's going to be good, not just for Republicans, but for Democrats across the country as well, who deserve transparency into how their taxpayer dollars are being spent, and who deserves to have lower taxes as a consequence of that waste, fraud, and abuse that no longer exist in the system. We've got to make sure that these are permanent changes, and I'm confident the steps are taken out on the gate. You got to go fast. You got to go quickly. When Donald Trump was given the mandate that he's been given, the mandate the voters gave Donald Trump was not for incremental change around the edges. The mandate last November was a mandate for sweeping positive change in this country. All right. Comments from viewers. Let's get to a few of them here before we go to another quick break. First comment, Doge refund. Yes, they're calling it the Doge dividend, which would be 20% of the savings go to the taxpayers. Spending the money that has been saved seems to defeat the purpose of saving it. Just remember that it is all borrowed money. Use the savings to reduce debt or reduce next year's budget. Thank you very much. Coming from a different viewer, is there any way we can have a recall election on Hochul? No, there is not. New York system is set up in a way that we cannot have a recall, for the governor. And the only one that can replace politicians is, ironically, Governor Hochul. The only real mechanism there is impeachment, but that would mean that one-party rule in Albany would have to decide to impeach her, which is not going to happen. So no, unfortunately, the system as it is right now, we do not have recall on our governor. Next up, I'd rather vote for Gumby than Hochul. Fair enough. Good morning, Frank. Well, good morning. Scott here. Oh, hey, Scott. To the 2 and 5 that want to leave the U.S. and live somewhere else, all I've got to say is don't let the front door hit you where you know where. I hear there's a lot of work in Ukraine and Gaza. And separate topic. Stay strong, guards. Hochul's not negotiating with you. She's telling you what to do. I'm not going to say exactly what you said, but thank you, Scott. But yes, that's what it feels like with Hochul. For sure. So Scott saying stay strong. And I would love to hear your thoughts on the news that the officers union, corrections officer union, and Hochul reached a deal. But remember, the unions have not been a part of this from the beginning. They really, unfortunately, do not speak for the guards. When I say unfortunately, they just have been on the sideline. They can't. And it seems as if they haven't done a great job in protecting the corrections officers in the past. Coming from a different viewer, from Mark, actually. The View is cutting down Musk again. I thought the View was going off the air. Yeah, I kind of did too, but not as of yet. All right, we got to take a break. Catch up here, and then we'll be back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Thanks for joining us. Now, the Doge cuts that have been made, they claim that it could cause trouble for the GOP spending bill. Senior Republicans are seriously exploring how to include cuts made by Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency in an upcoming government funding bill, a move that would skyrocket tensions with Democrats and drastically raise the potential for a government shutdown. Top GOP leaders, think about that. I don't even want to go into any more of that. But that's how much they don't want government fund cuts. That's how bad that they're willing to shut down the government, because there's the audacity of trying to save money for the taxpayers, that they're trying to cut the bloat, the overspending of the government. By the way, and they're painting this as the end of the world, but the NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, has fired about 800 employees, with more possible today. The Trump administration has its government shrinking sights set on the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, where around 800 employees have been tapped for termination, according to two sources close to the agency. More layoffs are possible today, one of the sources said, potentially costing the Weather, Climate, and Environmental Agency more than 1,000 employees by the end of the week. Now, air traffic controllers may get 30% pay raises as the Trump administration is prioritizing recruitment boosts. Air traffic controllers are set to receive a 30% pay hike as President Trump's administration seeks to boost recruitment. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy made the announcement during a press conference at the Air Traffic Controllers Academy in Oklahoma on Thursday. He argued that the pay structure and the technology air traffic controllers are forced to use are outdated. Currently, students are paid $17.61 an hour. By the way, you might be able to go to Walgreens and make that, right? So we're going to bump it up to $22.84 an hour. And again, I think making sure people have a wage that can allow them to live while they're going through school. But the real incentive is, again, 3 years out of this academy, and you're certified, on average, $160,000 a year. So you could be 24 years old, 23 years old, making a great salary as an air traffic controller. Okay. Now we're wrapping up here. I got to go through some things quickly. Trump says tariffs against Canada and Mexico will go into effect next week. Drugs are still pouring into our country, he said. Now that is that 25% tariff that we talked about 30 days ago. Absent another deal or a change of heart from President Trump, the tariffs will go into effect as scheduled on March the 4th. Drugs are still pouring into our country from Mexico and Canada at a very high and unacceptable level. A large percentage of these drugs, much of them in the form of fentanyl, are made in and supplied by China. We cannot allow this scourge to continue to harm the U.S., and therefore, until it stops or is seriously limited, the proposed tariffs scheduled to go into effect on March 4th will indeed go into effect as scheduled. Yep, let's take a break. Then we are going to wrap up today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Where did the time go? Get your last minute comments in so I can read them before the end of the program. We will be right back with Frankly Speaking. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security and Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. I've been mentioning all morning long that the Corrections Officers Union and Hochul have reached a deal to end that strike, potentially end that strike. That does not really mean a lot because it is, at the end of the day, all up to the corrections officers because they have not been supported in their strike by the union, and it does not seem as if some comments from viewers and in this piece by the New York Post said not representing the workers either. So we'll see where that goes, and we'll talk about it, I'm sure, on Monday. All right, let's go through some things quickly. Oh, first, a comment from a viewer. Trump got Mexico to hand over 30 cartel members, making Mexico safe again. Yes, Mexico extradited dozens of cartel leaders and members to the U.S., including the drug lord Rafael Caro Quintero, one of the worst and deadliest. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. White House officials have threatened to redraw Canadian border as Trump has been pushing Canada to become the 51st state. Peter Navarro, recommended revising the Canada-U.S. border, which is just crazy and dangerous, a source told The Telegraph. Trump has dismantled the Biden-era rules on military strikes and raids on terrorist targets. We got to go through quickly. Sorry, I should give you more information on that. FBI Director Kash Patel wants to bring the UFC to the FBI, according to sources. Patel suggests that he wants the FBI to establish a formal relationship with the UFC, which could develop programs for agents to improve their physical fitness. A virtual meeting with each field office's special agent in charge has long been a weekly occurrence, but this week's call was first led by Patel, who was sworn in as director last Friday. Within hours of Wednesday's call, word of Patel's UFC proposal spread to current and former FBI officials around the country. If they're trying to up their physical fitness, the UFC is very specific in their fitness. Trump has tapped Hung Kao, who wants military recruits willing to rip out their own guts to serve as the number 2 Navy official. Virginia Republican Senate candidate Hung Kao, a CAO, an outspoken proponent of toughening up the standards for military service, has been nominated to serve as the Undersecretary of the Navy. Hung is the embodiment of the American dream, Trump said. As a refugee to our great nation, Hung worked tirelessly to make proud the country that gave him his family a home. He went on to our amazing United States Naval Academy and later earned his master's degree in physics. He served in combat as Special Operations Officer for 25 years. With his experience both in combat and in the Pentagon, he will get the job done. Congratulations to Hung and his wonderful family. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth does not rule out the strikes on fentanyl labs in Mexico. Anything is on the table, he said. The commander-in-chief, ultimately with my consultation and with the chairman and others, will make those determinations. But nothing is off the table. Our sovereignty will be defended. So not ruling out military strikes on fentanyl labs. J.D. Vance tangled with a British Prime Minister over the infringements on free speech. The special relations between the U.S. and U.K. got a little awkward yesterday when Vice President J.D. Vance confronted British Prime Minister Keir Starmer in the Oval Office. Vance stood by his comments about the threat was from within because of the lack of free speech in Europe. I said what I said, which is what we do have, of course, special relations with our friends in the UK and also with some of our European allies. But we also know that there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British, of course. What the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and by extension, American citizens. So that is something that we'll talk about today at lunch. We've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom, and it will last a very, very long time, said the Labour Party politician. There's an interesting piece this morning, if you want to check it out, at the New York Post by Dana Kennedy. The would-be Trump assassin, Thomas Crooks, may have had an accomplice. Data shows, as investigators say, the FBI is suppressing information. And when we talk about the deep state, we're learning more and more about the deep state and a lot of questions being raised. And that's why it's good that Kash Patel is in there now. The FBI, many of these nameless, faceless bureaucrats, unelected bureaucrats, believe they're smarter and no better than the person that was elected president of the United States by the voter. And by the way, elected in a landslide. So that is at the New York Post. Very interesting piece if you have a moment. But we are out of time for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Yes, we are. I had so many things left to get to. We are out of time. Thank you for all the comments. Oh, to the viewer who just said this, have a great weekend. Well, you have a great weekend too. I appreciate you saying that and then sending a meme of take the 3-day challenge. Don't make fun of woke Democrats February 29th, 30th, and 31st. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend, everyone. And please join us every weekday morning starting at 6 a.m. for Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We will see you bright and early on Monday. Oh, don't forget, quickly, because I do have 10 seconds, don't forget that for our Chemung County Republican friends, the Wings and Petition Drive is tomorrow from 2 to 5 p.m. at the White Eagles Club. You just go in, you sign your name to the petition, get your candidates on the ballot, and you get some wings out of the deal. All right, there we go. Now we're out of time. Have a great weekend. We'll see you bright and early on Monday morning. I look forward to it already.